Hello and welcome to Beyond the Bio. Today I'm joined by Liz Perkins, who has experience of working across the national press from the Daily Telegraph to the Sunday Times. Liz is currently the night news editor of the Daily Express, where alongside her role she successfully changed the law through the award-nominated End This Injustice campaign that led the government to pledge to overhaul the family court through the Domestic Abuse Bill. Liz was previously the defence reporter for the South Wales Evening Post and Wales Online, where she often reported from Afghanistan between 2008 and 2014, something we are going to be exploring today. Liz was also elected as a chapter leader for the Oxford Business Alumni Network for the London chapter, leading her to single-handedly organise events at Blenheim Palace and the Houses of Parliament. She's also a member of European Women on Boards and Women in Journalism. I love Liz. She's so interesting. She's done so many things and is always super busy going to brilliant events and meeting super interesting people in a variety of settings. So I'm really excited to have Liz on the show today, talking to us about what it's like to be a journalist and how to pitch effectively to one. Let's get stuck in. Hi, Liz. Welcome to Beyond the Bio. It's great to have someone of your amazing experience on the show today.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
So we met at a networking event in London, and I quite like to share with listeners where I meet my guests because I think it's really useful to highlight the value of doing networking. And I suspect you're probably even better networked than me because you go to a lot of stuff.
You know, what's quite interesting about this is that at one time I didn't actually bother with networking at all. And the reason being is because I was doing so many hours that I would just start really, really early in the morning. And, you know, some days I'd be waking from 8 o'clock and still be working until like 11 o'clock at night, and I didn't really fancy going out after that. I just didn't have the energy to do it, and you know, I was devoting my time to lots of different organisations in London, and it was just not possible. And then I will say this, I went to Oxford University and I did organisational leadership there. And I remember one day one of our lecturers turned around and he started actually talking about Machiavelli and the Medici family and how they had all these contacts and all these people and how important it was that they got to know so many different people in society. And that he actually made me realise there and then that networking was something worth doing. I know it sounds ridiculous. I'd never ever been told that networking was worthwhile. It was, you know, didn't even think about it. I was just literally one of these people who just did the hard graft and didn't think about everything else. And you kind of met so many people during your working day that, you know, going out at night and meeting even more people, you don't think, oh, you know, I want to do that as well. But actually, I found it a bit of a game changer, to be honest, because the people I've met have been absolutely incredible. And it just opens so many different doors for you as well. You know what it's like. I mean, we went into that room in the Bulgari Hotel in Knightsbridge, not really knowing who we're going to see. And sometimes you just have like a quick chat. Sometimes it's only like 10 minutes. And then a year later, somebody reappears on LinkedIn and says, come to this, come to that. And yeah, it's incredible what can be achieved through networking. And I would say that people really should invest their time in that if they don't already.
Great advice. And I'm so glad that you came to that event because we met, we hit it off, and that's been really helpful. So awesome that you're finding networking so brilliant as well. So I want to talk to you about all things press, but just to give a bit of context, and you've kind of alluded to the fact that your role involves long hours, but can you tell us a bit more about what your role includes?
Okay, well, when I'm night news editing the Daily Express, I mean, I start at 5 o'clock at night and then we'll be working until around midnight. So basically, I'm keeping an eye on what news is breaking. So, you know, for example, last night we had information come through about Gaza and, you know, the latest death toll and what was happening over there. And we always have to update our papers, our websites. And you have stories written by reporters who I have to change around and edit. And those stories will then go to our team of sub-editors, and then they end up going onto the page where they're designed with pictures. And, you know, that is how we sort of create it to get the final product of a newspaper hitting the newsstands the next day. I mean, it's quite a frantic job, as you can imagine, because sometimes news breaks late. I mean, that's the thing with it. It's so unpredictable. We just don't know what is going to happen next. And it can be hugely exciting, but also very stressful as well. And, when I'm not doing that role, then obviously I write different stories too and get to meet all sorts of different people as well. So it's a fascinating job. It's not one for the faint-hearted is all I can say. And, you want to be the best that you can do. And you basically want to beat the opposition every time. And it's quite stressful in that respect because you want to get that story first. And sometimes you don't, but you've got to try to be the one who gets that exclusive, because when you do, it's hugely rewarding.
I bet. And I know that you've had some amazing experiences within your career. Can you tell us about a few of the crazy situations that you found yourself in over the years?
Well, I had a random phone call once from the Ministry of Defence, and they said to me, "Would you like to go to Afghanistan?" And I was just like, wow, I was on a regional newspaper in Wales, and, it's the biggest opportunity to cover that massive story at that point in time. And you just think, this is unbelievable. And, when you're landing at Camp Bastion in the middle of the night and the dust is coming up in your face and it's really so hot and it's just like another world, isn't it? And, I got to go to Afghanistan 6 times, which is just an utterly incredible opportunity. I mean, I didn't just stay in Camp Bastion, I went out with the troops. And I went to Nadali and Babaji and Garmsia, where actually Prince Harry was once based with the Gurkhas there. And, I got to see the Russian troops that were left behind, the Russian tanks, I should say, sorry, and that were left behind from the previous conflict. And just, saw people trying to get on with their day-to-day lives as well. But sometimes you have opportunities during trips like that you don't necessarily expect. And I had a meeting there with what I thought were just the Afghan police. And years later, I found out that one of them was a member of the Taliban. So I kind of felt myself lucky that nothing bad happened. I mean, you'd go to like meetings in the night when you were staying in different bases, and they would say there were suicide bombers operating in the area, and the risks are high. But it's important to tell the story of what the troops were going through, what changes were being made in Afghanistan. I mean, clearly now it's we have the Taliban back in power, which is not what anybody wanted. But, at the time, it was fascinating to be able to see all that. I mean, it was terrible, the death tolls that the British forces suffered and also their allies as well. But, as a journalist, it's hugely exciting when you're in a Chinook flying over the green zone and just, seeing these incredible sights. It's just, it's like something out of a movie, really. So I count myself lucky to do that. I mean, I also, when everybody was grounded, when the volcano went up in Iceland, I was actually flying in a plane past that volcano and saw the ash chugging out of it. And it was there in a press strip. And I went to stay in a hotel actually not that far away, and the manager there decided that it would be a good idea to take us to go and have a look. And originally he wanted us to be flown over it in a plane, and had a change of heart and decided to drive us up instead. And we ended up going through all the no entry signs to get right to the top of this volcano. And they said, jump out. And there we were drinking champagne, watching the lava coming out of this volcano. And the people of Iceland were thinking, what on earth is going on? And started phoning the police because they could see all these lights going up, the lights of the Jeep heading up to the top of it. And we had the police chase after us, but luckily we weren't arrested. So, I mean, you get opportunities like that, which is just pretty special and you never ever forget. And then one minute, you could be, in the same place as Her Majesty the Queen at Clarence House and, speaking to domestic abuse victims because of campaigns that I've championed. And the next minute being out in the French Alps with the former England rugby international Mike Tindall. Even though I can't ski, I did a series of interviews with him there and that got published in the Daily Express and also the Telegraph. And you just don't know who you're going to meet next, because sometimes it's a homeless person or somebody who's actually a prostitute. But yet, you're speaking to people in society that other people don't necessarily speak to and they ignore. But you have to take into account that we do give a voice to the voiceless, and that's what we're there for. We don't just, see Brad Pitt at Wimbledon, which I was lucky enough to do, but we also speak to people who other people ignore, and other people really need to champion and say, look, they're suffering. This is what we can do about it.
I'm really putting you on the spot here, but who is the most interesting person that you've met, or maybe the most surprising person that you've met in that they maybe weren't what you expected?
Gosh, what a question. I'm thinking, I met so many different people over the years. Incredible.
Was there anyone sort of wow where you were kind of a bit, you didn't know what to say? Because you're chatty. Who had you speechless?
Well, the one time I was a bit speechless was I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings, and I watched all of it. I know everything that's going to happen next. And Elijah Wood, Frodo, came to Wales, and he's just the nicest, most unassuming sort of chap you can imagine. He's just lovely. And I just remember the hotel room door opening, and I felt like my stomach had dropped out of my body because I was just like, oh my gosh, it's Frodo. And he was just great to interview. But I did actually have a moment when I was just like, I can't believe this. I was at Wimbledon last year, and Novak Djokovic was like, there in front of me. And I've been watching tennis since I was like born, basically. And, when you're seeing people like that who you think, wow, this is one of the greatest tennis players of all time. It's amazing. It really is. You're just thinking, wow, how lucky am I to be able to see these people and speak to these people, because there are so many across the world who would love to do what I do. And, you appreciate all of it because you just think, who am I going to see next? Who am I going to get to speak to next? And it's just, it's a wonderful job.
Yeah, I bet you must get invited to some awesome things. If you ever need a +1, Liz, I'll be there. So people that are listening will be really intrigued to know, how, from your experience, how best they should be pitching to people like you with stories and things. So I just want to ask you a few questions about that. How many pitches do you typically receive each week?
Gosh, do you know something? I get emails all the time, like all the time, about all sorts of different things. Some of it you just go, and some of it you go, wow, that's amazing, and you don't always get that many that you go, that's amazing. I mean, some of it you think, yes, this could be featured, but you wouldn't do like a massive story on it. But sometimes you get people sort of get in touch with you. Like, I remember this one that somebody just got in touch randomly and said, look, there's a woman and one of their friends or boyfriend had been killed by somebody who shot them with a crossbow. And that is so shocking that you just think, wow, this is terrible. I know the government at the moment are looking at regulations around that. So people like that, you think, they've got a real story. There needs to be change on something like that. And that's where you can do something about. But sometimes you get a lot of surveys that are saying, the Principality Stadium in Wales has come forth in their survey of the best stadiums in the world. And that makes a bit, but it's like, it's not like somebody saying, oh, look, you can do this interview with this incredible person. And I think to try and stand out, you've got to be able to say, look, I've got something about my business that you don't know, or you've changed something with your business, or you know what I mean? It's just like sometimes you've got, like in terms of the environment, you might have found something and you think, right, we can do this and this and this, and then we can help in terms of climate change or whatever. Or you've got, it's like trying to find that golden nugget, isn't it? And not every story is going to be out there and amazing and you think, yes, this is brilliant. That's like comes along every so often, right? But if you want to have your story featured, you've got to think, what have you got that other people don't have? And you really have to sell your business, I would say, or, your story or whatever, because you might have done something, that nobody else has, and you've kept it quiet. And you just think, these people could be really inspirational, and it's usually it's people who are quieter, who don't really tell anybody anything, and they're the ones who really should be shouting and screaming about their story. And sometimes people who are, louder about it don't necessarily have as fascinating a story. It's really hard, though, when you're trying to pitch to somebody like me, because we do get a lot of people getting in touch, and you just think, how do I make it stand out? I'm sure you've experienced that yourself, because when you were starting out with your business, I mean, you think, how do I make mine different to the crowd?
From your perspective, are people still sending press releases out, and are they still effective, or is it better to pitch a story within an email? What's your preferred format to receive?
I think you can do both. I mean, sometimes you get a really good press release, whether that's in relation to a charity or the government or whatever it is, and you've just got to make sure your facts are in there. This is very basic. It's the who, the what, the where, the when, and the how. You have to have all that information in there. You don't want a situation where you draw a press release and you don't have all the info in there, right? Because the last thing somebody as busy as me wants to do is having to chase and say, how old is this person? Where are they from? What have they done? I should know everything about that person or that firm or whatever just by picking up that press release, okay? And you need it to be punchy, you need it to sound exciting, you need it, but it's just like, don't try and oversell something that is completely not there either, because we're going to see through it too. And what you find sometimes is press officers will push something, and you're just thinking, if I haven't got back to you, there's a reason, and it's because it's just not going to work. Do you know what I mean? It's not because you're being mean or whatever. You just know instinctively what kind of stories work and what don't. I mean, it depends on your paper as well, because obviously if you're looking at the Telegraph, then they've got very different things that they will do to something like the Express. I mean, the Express has got a older sort of audience, so they're going to be interested in pensions, right? Because it affects their day-to-day life, okay? So, that's something that they would look at. I mean, someone like the Telegraph, I mean, they feature like seaweed farms and different things like that. Do you know what I mean? It's just like they will look at different things in the countryside, and they'll look at, all sorts of different things, but you have to be conscious as well, the political slant of certain papers. I mean, the Mirror is like obviously Labour, you've got the Times who will be looking at, Tory sort of perspectives and things like that. So you have to be conscious of who you're pitching to, because if you want success, then, do your research, think about what you're doing. Because I mean, if you had a celebrity story, you'd probably go to the Sun. You wouldn't go to the Telegraph, because they're not going to feature your story, right? It's just, you have to think first and just don't just send it everywhere. And sometimes if you've got an exclusive story, right, somebody's going to get really excited about that if they say, can we have this exclusively? And then they'll give you an even bigger show. So, you've got to think about what you've got, because sometimes you've got a gem of a story and you could really, really do well off it, because even if it's an exclusive in one newspaper and it goes on a website and then it gets picked up, who's to say like that story is not going to go right around the world and you're just going to do really well off it?
Just picking up on a few points then, it sounds like you're saying some basics there just around picking the right publication for the story and what their interests are. The press release isn't over, and actually it needs to have all of that information so you don't have to go chasing. So it sounds like the ideal is that someone would put a bit of an overview of a pitch in the email to you, so it's enough to get your attention, include the press release, but make sure it's like super, super tailored to you.
Exactly, because as long as you've got all the facts, nice pictures, then it's great. And you can turn that around really quickly and it will find a space in the paper, I mean, everybody loves an animal story, right? There's a story that's obviously going to go out there. But what you have to think with stories is it's all about human beings. It's about people. That's what it's about. We want to know about the person behind the firm. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, I mean, I ended up randomly going to an awards ceremony at Jeff Bezos' house, the founder of Amazon. I mean, we want to know about people like him. How does he become this, one of the world's richest men, and people like Elon Musk and people like Richard Branson or whatever, right? We want to know their stories. We don't want to just know, what the share price is or whatever. We want to know more about it. It's like, if I was interviewing you, then I'd want to know, how did you get to where you are? How did you get your MBE? That's the thing. It's just like, it's a human story, and it's that connection between readers and the story, and that's what you're trying to get at, really. You're kind of getting under the skin. So sometimes it's better give the overview, but let us do the rest and we can find out about that person.
Music to my ears, that is, Liz. In my Business Mojo, we really focus on the individuals because we think individuals are more interesting for exactly the reasons you've described. So yeah, the share price, there will be people that are interested in that, but actually it's that human connection that's interesting to everybody. So I can totally relate to that. Just another thing around what you were saying about, people pushing and people sending lots of emails and stuff. Do you ever reply and give them some feedback to say, look, this is just a crap story, we're not going to publish it? Or do you just delete them?
I've never, ever emailed somebody back and said that, ever. Because I think, we've all got a job to do. They're just trying to pay their bills. I wouldn't dream of being rude. I may not just not reply because, it's time. It's time. And it's just like, if you don't hear back from me, it's because it's just not good enough. And that's it. But I feel sorry for some of these press officers. Some of them don't know when to let go. And I will send you emails about 3 or 4 times and you're just thinking, come on now, this is not going to work. But, but I would never sort of say, how awful something is. There's just no point, not unless somebody is like phone in you. I mean, it's just, but yeah, I think that sometimes you just got to take the hint and go,
what point should you take the hint? How many times is reasonable to follow up? Just sort of once, or is that enough?
I've had people sort of send me an email and then they message you going, have you got that email and all this? So you have that like a couple of times. But I think, if it hasn't worked, then go to somebody else, because we're not being rude or anything. It's just, the thing is, you don't have time to send emails back to every single person who's pitched you. But the thing is, if I've seen a story that I think is really good and they've sent it to me at 8:30 in the morning and I'm replying about 5 or 10 minutes later, it's a good story and that I'm interested and I want to do something with it and I'm going to get that out there. But it's just, we have busy jobs and it's not like we're trying to be unfair to anybody. We look at all the stories coming in. Sometimes people miss emails and it's fair enough to chase, because sometimes, somebody might have seen it and then they've had to rush off somewhere else. Fair enough to follow up, but just don't keep on doing it like 10 times, because that's annoying and people won't want to deal with you. So it's just, be fair to yourself as well. Or maybe you could look at, changing your press release around, because clearly there's no interest. And, it's hard though. I mean, it must be tough, because obviously if you are in PR, then you've got a client going, why did you get this into this publication? I've got friends who are in PR who have said, I've had an absolute roasting because this story hasn't gone out. And you're like, yeah, they do. It is. And they've got clients to keep happy. But we've got to have standards in our newspapers and we can't put everything in online or whatever. Sometimes it works online better. Sometimes it does. And you know what I mean? It's like sometimes a Mother's Day story, like the other day, giving facts on, whether mothers have a favourite child or not. I mean, that worked online fine. But, it'd be like this much, really, a small little piece in the paper. So, I mean, you get in different ways. You've got to be open-minded about where you want that story pitched.
And do you think people underestimate online? Because in fact, you might be able to tell me, what is the difference between people actually picking up hard copy physical papers these days versus reading stories online?
People tend to read stories online much more now, because I think lives are hugely busy. And I think people's buying habits kind of changed in COVID because they couldn't go out and they couldn't physically buy papers, because obviously some of them are putting their health at risk at that point in time. I think life has completely transformed after the COVID era in lots of different ways, whether that's train services actually not arriving at all and nobody really caring that they've been cancelled these days. In the past, it would be just total uproar as to why this train hasn't arrived. Yeah, I think that kind of has changed and accelerated change as well. And I think that, the digitization of lots of different industries, I think that's really impacted. But the reality is, I mean, when I get out of bed, I look at my phone, I look at the website, I see what's out there. But I think it's good to have both approaches, because obviously it gives you a bigger audience if it goes into the paper and then it goes online and then it goes into an iPad edition and all the rest of it. I think you've just got to be open-minded to the fact that, you want your product out there or your business out there or you out there. You've got to just go with whatever. And you have to think, social media has such a strong impact now as well, doesn't it? So we've all got Twitter feeds and all the rest of it affiliated to our newspapers and, our websites. So there's lots of different ways to get publicity. I think actually it's probably better now for people because they get a bigger opportunity in a way. Because you're not just getting one hit in a paper, you're getting it online, you're getting it everywhere. You're appearing on X, you're appearing on Facebook, you're appearing on all these different sites, as well as getting that opportunity to be in a national. And it's just, it's huge, isn't it, when you think about it? I mean, why wouldn't you want to go for that?
Absolutely. Well, you've given me a few things to think about for sure. And I'm sure that the listeners will get loads from your fantastic advice. If anyone wants to connect with you, we won't give them your email. Is the best way for them to connect with you and see what you're up to is to follow you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely live on LinkedIn. So if they look up Liz Perkins, night news editor of the Daily Express, or they can also follow me at Liz Perkins Media on X as well. That's, I'm always updating different things there. So, and they can feel free to drop me any stories.
We'll pop your X and LinkedIn profile links in the show notes to make it super easy for anyone to connect with you. And I really like that you are pretty active on LinkedIn, because I actually think that's unusual for someone in your role, because people might lurk on there, but they don't seem to update it as much. They're better on Twitter or X. So it's good to see you active on everything. And I think it links to a lot of the networking stuff that we were talking about at the beginning, because you're always doing something cool. So you've got really interesting things to share.
There's always something happening. And I mean, it's like the other day I was like given a lecture at Oxford University. So you just think, well, I'm doing so many different things. It's not just journalism, but I'm also like hosting events and all sorts of different things as well. So, and like you say, meeting lots of different people like you, and you just don't know who you're going to meet next. So I just try and keep it interesting, because there's always something to update on.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Liz.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you're serious about growing your profile, take our free profile assessment quiz to see where you're at right now and get hints and tips on how to improve your score. You'll find the link to the quiz in the show notes. If you've enjoyed the episode, it would be mint if you'd subscribe, like, and leave a review. See you next Monday.